The school hallway was loud with chatter, lockers slamming, and the usual chaos between classes. Among the crowd, a quiet black teenager kept his head down, gripping his books tightly as he moved. He was used to being invisible, or at least, he tried to be. But some people never let him forget he was different. A group of boys, the kind who thought they ruled the school, spotted him. The leader, a tall guy with a smirk, nudged his friends. "Look who it is," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "The ghost who thinks he's too good to talk to us." The boy didn't react. He kept walking, hoping they'd lose interest. But they never did. One of the bullies stepped in front of him, blocking his path. "Where you going in such a hurry? Got somewhere better to be?" The boy swallowed hard but kept his voice steady. "Just trying to get to class." The leader laughed, looking at his friends like it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. "Ah, he talks. Thought you forgot how." He leaned in, his voice dropping to a mocking whisper. "Or are you scared?" The boy clenched his jaw but didn't answer. He knew anything he said would just make it worse. One of the other bullies snatched his notebook and flipped through it. "What's this? Homework? You actually think teachers care what you write?" He tore a page out, crumpling it in his hands. A few students nearby glanced over but quickly looked away. No one wanted to get involved. The boy reached for his notebook, but the bully held it just out of reach, grinning. "Come on, man," the boy said quietly. "Just give it back." The leader smirked. "Or what? You gonna cry? Run to the principal?" He shoved him lightly, just enough to make him stumble. The boy caught himself, his chest tight. He hated this. Hated how they always made him feel small. But most of all, he hated that no one ever stepped in. Just then, the bell rang. The bullies groaned, tossing his notebook to the ground before walking off, laughing like it was all some big joke. The boy picked up his torn notes, his hands shaking. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. He had learned a long time ago, fighting back only made things worse. So he kept quiet. But today felt different. Today, something inside him shifted. As he walked into class, late again, the teacher gave him a disapproving look but didn't say anything. He slid into his seat, ignoring the whispers around him. At lunch, he sat alone, as usual. The cafeteria was loud, but he felt completely isolated. He pulled out his phone, hesitating before typing a message to his father. "It's happening again." He deleted it. Then typed it again. His finger hovered over the send button. His father was a busy man. He didn't like bothering him with this stuff. But today he couldn't take it anymore. He hit send. A reply came almost instantly. "I'll handle it." The boy didn't know what that meant, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. Meanwhile, the bullies were in their usual spot, bragging about their latest win. "That dude is so weak," the leader laughed. "He didn't even try to fight back." His friends nodded, feeding off his energy. They had no idea what was coming. Because the quiet boy they tormented every day? His father wasn't just anyone. And when he said he'd handle it, he meant it. The next morning, the school felt different. The usual noise was there, shouting, lockers banging, sneakers squeaking on the floor, but the air was tense. The quiet boy walked in, shoulders straight, eyes forward. He wasn't hiding today. The bullies noticed immediately. "Look who finally grew a spine," the leader sneered, stepping into his path. His friends fanned out behind him, grinning like this was their favorite game. The boy didn't flinch. He just stared back, silent. That threw them off. "What, you deaf now?" the bully snapped, shoving him hard. The boy stumbled but caught himself. His hands curled into fists at his sides, but he didn't swing. He just waited. The hallway went quiet. Students stopped to watch. Even the teachers lingering near their classrooms paused, sensing something was about to happen. Then, a deep voice cut through the tension like a knife. "That's enough." Everyone turned. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood at the end of the hallway, his expression unreadable. He wore a crisp suit, his posture commanding respect without a single word. His eyes locked onto the bullies, and for the first time, they looked unsure. The boy's breath caught. "Dad." The leader of the bullies recovered first, puffing out his chest. "Who the hell are you?" The man didn't answer. He just walked forward, each step slow, deliberate. The crowd of students parted like water, making way for him. The bully's smirk faltered. The man stopped in front of his son, placing a firm hand on his shoulder. Then he turned to the bullies. "You like pushing people around?" His voice was calm. Too calm. The bully scoffed, but his friends were already backing up. "This some kind of joke? You his daddy or something?" The man smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "Yeah. I am." Silence. Then, the principal burst out of his office, face pale. "Mr." He cut himself off, swallowing hard. "Sir, I didn't know you were coming today." The bullies froze. Because the principal never stuttered. Never looked scared. The man didn't even glance at him. He kept his eyes on the boys in front of him. "You got names?" No one answered. He tilted his head. "I'll find out anyway." The leader finally found his voice. "This is Bull. Watch your mouth." The man's tone didn't change, but something in his voice made the bully shut up instantly. The principal stepped forward, sweating. Let's take this to my office." The man nodded once. Then he looked at his son. "You good?" The boy nodded, still processing everything. "Good." He turned back to the bullies. "You three. Office. Now." For the first time, the bullies looked scared. Because this wasn't just some angry parent. This was something else. And they had no idea what they'd just gotten into. The walk to the principal's office felt longer than usual. The bullies shuffled ahead, shoulders tense, while the man, the boy's father, followed behind like a shadow. His presence alone made the air feel heavier. The principal kept glancing back nervously, adjusting his tie. "Sir, I assure you, had I known about this situation earlier, would have." "Not now," the man said, voice low. The principal swallowed hard and stayed quiet. Inside the office, the bullies sat stiffly in their chairs, eyes darting between the principal and the man now standing near the window. The boy stood beside his father, still trying to process everything. The man crossed his arms. "So, who wants to explain?" Silence. The leader of the bullies finally broke it. "Explain what?" "We were just messing around." The man's expression didn't change. "Messing around?" "Yeah. It's not a big deal." The principal cleared his throat. "Now, boys, if there's been any bullying." The man held up a hand, cutting him off. His eyes never left the bullies. "You think this is funny?" The bully shifted in his seat but didn't back down. "It's just how school is. He needs to toughen up." The man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "You're right. School should teach you things." He leaned forward slightly. "So let me teach you something." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a badge. The bullies froze. The principal went pale. Because it wasn't just any badge. It was a FBI badge. The man's voice was calm, but every word carried weight. "I don't just handle cases. I handle people who think they can hurt others and get away with it. The leader's mouth opened, then closed. One of the other bullies finally found his voice. We didn't know. Didn't know what? The man tilted his head. That my son was off limits? Or that actions have consequences? The room was dead silent. The boy stared at his father, stunned. He'd always known his dad worked for the government, but FBI? The principal finally spoke, voice shaky. Sir, I'll make sure this behavior is dealt with immediately. Suspension, detention, whatever you. The man held up a hand again. I'll handle it. The bullies looked like they wanted to disappear. The man turned to his son. You okay with that? The boy nodded slowly, still processing. Good. He looked back at the bullies. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to apologize. Not just to him. To every kid you've ever made feel small. The leader opened his mouth to argue, then thought better of it. Then, the man continued, you're going to do community service. And if I hear one more report about you so much as looking at someone the wrong way? He leaned in. You'll be dealing with me directly. The bullies nodded fast. The man straightened. Good. Now get out. They practically ran from the room. Once they were gone, the principal let out a shaky breath. Agent, The man cut him off. You let this happen under your watch. The principal paled further. The man turned to his son. Let's go. As they walked out, the boy finally spoke. Dad, you never told me you were FBI. His father sighed, the hardness in his eyes softening. I don't like bringing work home. But I won't let anyone hurt you. The boy nodded, feeling something he hadn't in a long time, safe. Meanwhile, the bullies huddled outside, voices hushed and panicked. We're screwed, one whispered. The leader clenched his fists. No way this is over. But for the first time, he wasn't so sure. The news spread through the school faster than a wildfire. By lunchtime, everyone knew, the quiet kid who got pushed around? His dad was FBI. Whispers followed the boy as he walked through the halls, but this time, the stares were different. Some kids looked at him with curiosity. Others with respect. A few even nodded at him like he was suddenly worth noticing. But the bullies? They were nowhere to be seen. At least, not until the final bell rang. As the boy stepped outside, he spotted them huddled near the bike racks, talking in low, urgent voices. The leader's face was red with anger, his hands gesturing wildly. When he noticed the boy watching, he stopped mid-sentence and glared. For a second, the boy hesitated. Then he straightened his shoulders and kept walking. He didn't get far. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, window rolling down. His father nodded at him. Get in. The boy slid into the passenger seat, relieved. He didn't want another confrontation today. But as the car pulled away, his father's phone rang. He answered on speaker. Agent Reynolds. A woman's voice, sharp and furious, blasted through the car. This is Linda Carter. My son just came home terrified because of you. The boy stiffened. The bully's mom. His father didn't react. Your son has been harassing mine for months. That's a lie, the woman snapped. He's a good boy. And you threatened him? Do you know who my husband is? The man's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. No. But I know who I am. The woman let out a disbelieving laugh. You think your badge makes you special? My husband is a senior partner at Harlan and Graves. We have friends in the DA's office. You're not untouchable. The boy's stomach dropped. Lawyers. His father stayed calm. If you want to file a complaint, my supervisor's number is on the FBI website. Otherwise? Teach your kid some respect. He hung up. The car was silent for a long moment. Then the boy spoke, voice quiet. Is this going to cause trouble for you? His father glanced at him. No. But. No. His tone left no room for argument. This isn't just about you anymore. That woman thinks power lets her son hurt people. She's wrong. The boy nodded slowly. His father's phone buzzed again. He checked it, then exhaled sharply. We're making a detour. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to a nondescript office building downtown. The boy followed his father inside, confused, until they reached a conference room, where 3 men in suits waited. One stood immediately. Agent Reynolds. We heard about the situation. The boy's father didn't sit. And? The man hesitated. The Carters have connections. They're claiming you abused your authority. The boy's chest tightened. His father just smiled. Good. The suits blinked. Pull the school's security footage for the past 6 months, his father said. Every shove, every taunt, every time my son walked into class with torn papers. Then send it to the DA's office, and the local news. One of the men paled. Sir, that could. Do it. The command was quiet but absolute. The men exchanged glances, then nodded. As they left the building, the boy finally understood. His father wasn't just protecting him. He was sending a message. That night, the leader of the bullies sat at the dinner table, picking at his food while his parents argued. This is outrageous, his father snarled, pacing. An FBI agent threatening a child? I'll have his badge by tomorrow. His mother nodded furiously. The school's lawyer is already drafting. The man's phone rang. He answered, then went very, very still. What? His wife demanded. He slowly lowered the phone. The DA just called. They have video evidence. Of everything. The color drained from the bully's face. His father turned to him, voice deadly quiet. What exactly have you been doing at school? For the first time in his life, the bully had no smart answer. The local news segment aired at 6 p.m. sharp. Disturbing footage emerges tonight from Lincoln High, showing systematic bullying ignored by staff, until one parent turned out to be a federal agent. The boy sat on the couch, watching as shaky cell phone videos flashed across the screen, his notebook being ripped, shoulders being shoved, the bullies laughing while teachers looked the other way. His stomach twisted seeing it all laid bare. His father stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear. Good. Run it again at 11. He hung up and glanced at his son. You okay? The boy nodded, though his hands were clenched tight. Did you know they had this much footage? Knew they had some. Didn't know it was this bad. His father's jaw tightened as the news played another clip, the principal walking right past a hallway confrontation without stopping. School's about to have a very bad night. At the Carter household, the TV suddenly switched off mid-broadcast. What the hell was that? Mr. Carter whirled on his son, who shrank into the couch. Those videos show you terrorizing that boy. It was just. Just what? His father's voice shook the framed diplomas on the wall. My firm represents 3 school board members. Do you have any idea what this does to me? His wife gripped his arm. Darling, surely we can. No. He yanked his arm away. That FBI agent didn't just release this to the news. He CC'd the entire district office, the teachers' union, and half the Justice Department. He stabbed a finger at his son. You apologize tomorrow. On your knees if you have to. The bully's mouth fell open. But Dad. But nothing. His father's briefcase hit the wall with a crash. You think this is about some schoolyard fight? That man could bury me in federal audits for fun. For the first time, the bully realized, his father wasn't angry at the agent. He was scared of him. The next morning, the school parking lot was packed with news vans. The boy stepped off the bus to a surreal scene, reporters shoving microphones at the principal, who stammered about a full investigation, while teachers hurried inside with their heads down. Then he saw them. The bullies. They stood in a tight group by the flagpole, looking like they wanted to vanish. When they spotted him, the leader hesitated, then walked over. The boy tensed. Look. The bully's voice was barely above a whisper. About what happened. A camera flash went off. A reporter had spotted them. The bully froze like a deer in headlights as the crowd surged toward them. Are you one of the students in the videos? How long has this bullying been going on? Do you feel responsible for? The boy's father suddenly appeared, stepping between them and the cameras with the ease of someone used to controlling chaos. Enough. That single word sent reporters stumbling back. He turned to his son. You good? The boy nodded, heart pounding. His father studied the bully for a long moment, then did something unexpected. He stepped aside. Say what you came to say. The bully swallowed hard. No cameras now. No audience. Just the truth. I'm sorry. It came out ragged, like the words physically hurt him. We thought it was. I don't know. Funny. The boy searched his face. For once, there was no smirk. No arrogance. Just shame. His father gave a barely perceptible nod. The boy took a deep breath. You made every day hell. The bully flinched. I don't forgive you. The boy held his gaze. But if you mean it? Prove it. A shout came from the school doors, the principal, waving frantically at the bully. Mr. Carter. Your parents are in my office now. The bully paled and hurried off. The boy's father watched him go. He meant it. How can you tell? Because scared people don't lie well. He put a hand on his son's shoulder. You handled that right. For the first time in months, the boy walked into school with his head high. In the principal's office, 3 sets of furious parents waited. The Carter boy's father spoke through clenched teeth. My son will be transferring schools immediately. The principal mopped his brow. Of course, of course. Not good enough. The boy's father stepped into the office, shutting the door behind him. You ignored this for years. How many other kids suffered because you didn't want to upset donor families? The principal opened his mouth. Save it. The man pulled a folded paper from his jacket. My office is auditing every bullying complaint filed here in the past 5 years. Expect subpoenas by Friday. The parents exchanged horrified looks. As the boy's father turned to leave, the principal whispered, You're destroying this school over some kid's squabble? The man paused at the door. No. I'm saving it from people like you. The school cafeteria buzzed with a strange new energy. Students who had never spoken to the boy before now nodded at him as he passed. A girl from his math class even slid over at the lunch table, making space without a word. He sat cautiously, half expecting some cruel joke. But then she pushed a napkin toward him. Scrawled on it. They pushed me into lockers last year. Thanks. The boy stared at the note, his throat tight. He'd been so alone, he never realized others were suffering too. Across the room, the remaining bullies, now down to 2 since Carter transferred, hunched over their trays, avoiding everyone's eyes. The dynamic had flipped overnight. One of them, a lanky kid who usually followed the leader's every move, kept glancing at the boys' table. Then, suddenly, he stood up. His buddy grabbed his arm. Dude, what are you? The lanky kid shook him off and walked over. The cafeteria went quiet. He stopped in front of the boy, hands shaking. "Can I sit?" The boy studied his face. This wasn't the smirking tormentor from before. This was someone scared, lost. He nodded to the empty seat. The kid sat down heavily. I need you to know I didn't," his voice cracked. "I didn't like doing that stuff. I just didn't know how to stop." The boy remembered how the leader would shove this kid too when he hesitated. How his laughter always sounded forced. "Why now?" the boy asked quietly. The kid's eyes flicked to the security cameras in the corners. "Because I can't be on those videos next." A few tables away, the last remaining bully, the leader's right-hand man, slammed his tray down and stormed out. The boy realized something then. The fear hadn't left the school. It had just changed sides. After school, the boy found his father waiting by the car, talking to a woman in a sharp pantsuit. 3 teachers placed on leave so far, the woman was saying. "The superintendent wants to meet with you tomorrow." His father spotted him and ended the conversation. As they drove off, the boy asked, "Who was that?" "Department of Education investigator." His father glanced at him. "Turns out your principal was burying bullying reports to keep test scores up." The boy digested this. All this time, the adults knew. They just didn't care. His father's phone buzzed. He checked it, then frowned. "What?" "One of your bullies just showed up at the FBI field office." The boy's stomach dropped. "Which one?" "The quiet one. Says he has information." The lanky kid sat stiffly in a stark interview room, clutching a soda the agent had given him. He jumped when the boy's father entered. "You're not in trouble," the man said, taking a seat. "Start from the beginning." The kid took a shaky breath. "It wasn't just us. There's this system. Older kids tell the younger ones to pick targets. Teachers look the other way if your parents donate." The boy's father listened, taking notes. "Names." The kid paled but started talking. 20 minutes later, the agent leaned back. "Why come forward now?" The kid looked down. "Because when Carter transferred, his dad made him delete all the videos from his phone." "What videos?" "The really bad ones. The ones they used to make kids do stuff so they wouldn't tell." The kid's voice dropped to a whisper. "I'm in some of them." The boy's father stilled. "Where are these videos now?" "Gone." "But..." The kid met his eyes for the first time. "Carter's dad made copies. For insurance," he said. The room went very quiet. The man stood. "Wait here." Outside, he called the boy. "I need you to think hard. Did they ever film you?" The boy's blood ran cold. "Once. Last year. They made me." He couldn't say it. His father's voice turned deadly calm. "Go to your room. Lock the door. I'm sending agents to the house." Meanwhile, at an expensive lakeside home, Mr. Carter scrolled through encrypted files on his laptop. His wife hovered behind him. "This is insane. You can't blackmail an FBI agent." "I'm not blackmailing him," he muttered. "I'm leveling the field." He clicked open a video. The doorbell rang. 3 agents stood on his porch, badges out. "Mr. Carter? We have a warrant to seize all electronic devices." As they led him out in handcuffs, reporters already gathering, his son watched from the upstairs window, face pale with realization. His father hadn't just protected him from bullies. He'd broken the whole system that let them thrive. The boy sat in the FBI field office's waiting area, hands clenched around a paper cup of hot chocolate an agent had given him. Across the room, the lanky ex-bully, now a witness, was giving his official statement behind closed doors. A familiar voice made him look up. "You okay?" It was the girl from the cafeteria, the one who'd passed him the note. She stood there holding 2 granola bars, offering one. The boy blinked. "What are you doing here?" She sat beside him, unwrapping her bar. "Agent Reynolds called my parents. I'm giving a statement about the locker room incidents." Her voice dropped. "They got me on video too." The boy's stomach twisted. He'd had no idea how far this went. Before he could respond, his father emerged from the interview room, face grim. He nodded at the girl. "Thanks for coming. They'll take your statement next." Then he turned to his son. "Walk with me." They stepped outside into the chilly evening air. His father exhaled heavily. "We found the videos." The boy's throat tightened. "How bad is it?" "Bad enough that Carter's father is looking at federal charges." His father studied him. "But here's what matters, none of this is your shame to carry. It's theirs." A car screeched into the parking lot. The last remaining bully, the right-hand man, jumped out, eyes wild. When he spotted them, he froze. The boy instinctively stepped back, but his father stood firm. The bully's hands were shaking. "I didn't know about the videos, I swear." "Carter never," he choked off as 2 agents moved toward him. The boy's father held up a hand, stopping them. He looked at the bully. "Why are you here?" The kid swallowed hard. "Because I don't want to go to jail." For the first time, the boy saw him not as a tormentor, but as what he really was, a scared kid who'd followed the wrong crowd. His father nodded to the agents. "Take his statement." As they led the bully inside, the boy spoke quietly. "You're not arresting him?" "Not today." His father put a hand on his shoulder. "Justice isn't just about punishment. It's about giving people a chance to do better." The boy thought about the lanky kid choosing to speak up. The girl finding courage to come forward. Even this last bully showing up voluntarily. Maybe the system wasn't completely broken after all. 2 days later, the boy returned to school to find it transformed. New security cameras everywhere. A banner in the hallway, "Respect starts here." And most startling, teachers actually stopping to listen when students talked. As he turned the corner, he nearly collided with the lanky kid, now sporting a fresh black eye. The boy tensed. "Who did that?" The kid shrugged. "Some guys who didn't like me talking to the FBI." He hesitated. "Look, about before. You already apologized." "Yeah, but..." The kid scuffed his shoe. "I want to make it right. So I'm starting this anti-bullying thing with the principal. Thought maybe you'd want to help." The boy studied him. This wasn't just damage control. The kid meant it. "Maybe," he said finally. "But not because you're scared. Because it's right." The kid nodded solemnly. As they walked to class together, the boy realized something: he wasn't just safe now. He was free. That afternoon, his father picked him up early. "We've got a meeting." "With who?" "The superintendent. And the school board. And," his father added with a slight smile, "some very nervous lawyers." The conference room at the district office was packed. The superintendent, a gray-haired man who'd ignored complaints for years, stood nervously as they entered. "Agent Reynolds, thank you for..." "Save it." The boy's father set a thick folder on the table. "Here's what's going to happen." For the next hour, he outlined changes: mandatory staff training, anonymous reporting systems, regular FBI check-ins. The board members scribbled frantic notes. When he finished, the superintendent cleared his throat. "And if we implement these measures, then my office doesn't press charges against the district for negligence." The room exhaled collectively. As they left, the boy whispered, "Will it actually work?" His father opened the car door for him. "It'll work because you'll be watching. And so will I." For the first time in forever, the boy smiled. Epilogue, 1 month later. The school assembly was packed. On stage, the lanky kid, now heading the new student safety committee, nervously adjusted the mic. So this is our first meeting. We've got suggestion boxes by the cafeteria and... He trailed off, spotting the boy in the front row. Their eyes met. The boy stood and walked up to join him. The auditorium erupted in applause. Not out of fear this time, but hope. The auditorium's applause faded as the boy stepped up to the microphone. A sea of faces stared back at him, students who'd once watched silently as he was tormented, teachers who'd turned blind eyes, even a few parents in the back. His palms were sweaty, but for the first time, he wasn't afraid. He took a deep breath. "A month ago, I wouldn't have stood up here," he began, voice steady. "Not because I didn't have anything to say, but because I didn't think anyone would listen." A hush fell over the room. He glanced at the lanky kid beside him, his former bully, now his uneasy ally. Then he continued. "Some of you know what happened. Some of you only heard rumors. But here's the truth, this wasn't just about me. It was about every kid who's ever been pushed, laughed at, or made to feel small. And the worst part?" He paused. "A lot of adults knew. And they did nothing." A few teachers shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The boy's father stood near the exit, arms crossed, watching silently. He hadn't coached him on what to say. This was his son's moment. "But here's the other truth," the boy said. "It doesn't have to stay that way." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the crumpled napkin the girl had given him in the cafeteria, the one that said, "They pushed me into lockers last year. Thanks. This changed everything for me," he said, holding it up. "Because I realized I wasn't alone. And if we all start speaking up, not just for ourselves, but for each other, things can change." The girl who'd written the note sat in the front row, eyes shining. A few other students nodded. The lanky kid stepped forward. "So, we're starting this committee. Not just to stop bullying. To make this school a place where no one has to be afraid." He glanced at the boy. "And we could use your help." For the first time in his life, the boy felt something powerful, not just safety, not just relief, but purpose. After the assembly, students crowded around the sign-up table. Even a few teachers joined. The boy's father waited at the back, observing. The principal approached him hesitantly. "Agent Reynolds, I." "Save it," the man said, but his tone wasn't harsh. "Just do better." The principal nodded, chastened. Across the room, the boy noticed the last remaining bully, the one who'd shown up at the FBI office, lingering near the door. Their eyes met. The kid hesitated, then walked over. "Look, he fumbled for words. "I signed up. For the committee." The boy studied him. "Why?" The kid shrugged, looking down. "Because I don't want to be that guy anymore." It wasn't a grand apology. It wasn't some dramatic redemption. But it was real. The boy held out a sign-up sheet. "Then prove it." That evening, the boy and his father sat on their porch, watching the sunset. "You did good today," his father said. The boy smiled. "We did good." His father shook his head. "No. This was you. I just leveled the playing field." The boy thought about everything that had changed, the bullies who'd been forced to face consequences, the teachers held accountable, the students finally finding their voices. And he realized something. His father hadn't just protected him. He'd taught him how to stand up, not just for himself, but for others. Epilogue, 1 year later. The school's annual anti-bullying assembly was packed. But this time, the boy wasn't the one at the microphone. He stood off stage, watching as a nervous 7th grader, a kid who'd been shoved into lockers the week before, spoke to the crowd. I didn't think anyone would care, the kid said, voice shaking. But I told the safety committee. And they helped. The boy glanced at the lanky kid, now the committee's co-president, who gave him a thumbs up. Later, as they walked the halls together, a freshman stopped them. Hey, can I join the committee too? The boy smiled. Yeah. You can. Because the work wasn't over. But now, no one had to face it alone.